SAS week 2. I hope that your child came home feeling a bit more settled, a bit more confident, maybe even a little bit happier after today's session. The first session is always quite nerve-wracking, but certainly by the end of week 2, we've had a chance to get to know each other a bit better and to do some more practical things, and it tends to be a bit more fun. So I hope that that was the case for your child today. So a bit of a recap on what happened during the meeting today. I'm not sure if you look at these books with your child or if you look at the parent version of them, but if you're not, that's absolutely fine. I think oftentimes just having that conversation in the car on the way home can be a really nice opportunity. You're generally one-on-one in the car, it can be nice and quiet, and you can have a bit of a chat while it's fresh in their mind. If that's not the appropriate time, then sometimes that time, quite a bit of quiet time in the evening after dinner, a bit of one-on-one time to have that bit of reflection can be really helpful as well. We don't want this to be a really time-intensive process for you, but we do want to try and encourage that conversation while they're learning and while it's motivating and while it's fresh for them. So during the session this week, we've learned about our own emotions. So last week we were identifying emotions in other people. This week we're identifying emotions in ourselves. The two main emotions that we focus on is anger and anxiety or worry. So you'll see a little card like this in their book, and we're using this as some visuals to help them recognize what happens in their body when they're feeling angry, and then what happens in their body when they're feeling worried. And there's a lot of overlap, a lot of things are similar, but some people notice more symptoms or signs, physical signs, than other people. And that's where we really need to start, is because those physiological signs, those feelings that are happening within our body, if we can teach our kids how to recognize those when they're happening, then they're much more likely then to be able to do something about it before it gets really bad. And so if we reflect ourselves on when we're starting to feel a bit anxious, sometimes it's not right then and there in the moment where the event is occurring, but there's actually been a lead up. There's been other things that have been going on in our day, other things that have been going on in our week that have caused our shoulders to feel a bit tense. Or we might be going somewhere new and we notice our hands are a bit sweaty. If we can pick those early warning signs, those early body cues, then it means that we can intervene early, and our strategies are going to be far more effective than if we wait until our heart's racing really fast and our brain's getting foggy. By then it's really hard to try and implement any strategies that are going to be effective. So the first thing we focus on is helping them recognize these body cues. And so we use a special emotionometer. I'll show you a picture of that now. This will be in the little book, the little blue book that your child has. They'll have a strip, a red one and a purple one. And on that strip, we've rated these body cues out of 10. So for some people, sweaty hands comes first when you're like a 1 out of 10. So when you're only a little bit angry or a little bit worried. Whereas the racing heart can come when you're an 8 out of 10. The cloudy brain can come when you're a 9 out of 10. The hitting and kicking and punching might not happen till you're a 10 out of 10. And so we want to help them not only to recognize the cue, but to recognize how anxious or worried they are before that cue appears, before that body cue appears. And so the cards that you'll get will look a little bit like this. And they will have marked on there the body cue that happens for them. So just because you notice that you get sweaty hands, that might not happen for your child, or if it does happen, that might not be something that bothers them or that they're even aware of. We're hoping that over time, through these conversations and through normalizing all of these bodily symptoms, that we can bring awareness to it and show them that perhaps they do get sweaty palms, but we don't want to just assume that because we have that feeling that they're going to have the same presentation in the same order. So it's very individual. It's really up to them to work out what feelings they're having and when. Even if you as an adult observe something in them, we want to be careful in how we're pointing that out to them. So you don't want to point it out right then and there in the moment if they're an 8 out of 10, because that's not going to go down well. Their language skills are just not there when they're getting so heightened. But you might want to notice, oh, hey, I noticed you've got sweaty hands there, or I notice you're breathing quite heavily, or I notice your fists are clenched. Do you think that might be a sign that you're getting a bit worried? And just to help reinforce and point out those signs to them. And it might, like I said, not happen right then in the moment, but once they've calmed down, once you've given them a cuddle, once you've had a drink, once you've solved the problem or left the stressful situation, then you might be able to reflect on it later and say, hey, I noticed that when you get angry, your fists really clench up. Had you noticed that? And have a bit of a conversation around it, or use things like, oh gosh, when I got angry today at work, I really noticed that I started to shake a little bit. And then explain what it is that you had to do to help you to regulate and to calm down. So the first thing that we're focusing on is recognizing the body cues. The second thing we focus on is putting them in order of when they occur, in terms of how do we know that we're getting more and more worried or more and more angry. And then the next thing is to start to align those with situations that cause that to happen. So what is a situation where I'm a 1 of anger compared to a situation where I'm a 10 of anger? So a 1 out of 10 might be when mum says where I'm not having peanut butter in my lunch today. It might be just a 1 out of 10, whereas when my sister pinches the remote off me when I'm in the middle of watching my favorite show, that might be an 8 out of 10. So helping them to recognize those situations. Again, we use some stickers and we put those up on that chart. And then we turn the chart over and start to look at, what are we going to do about this? And this is something that will flow through to session 3 as well, is how do we help our body to feel better when we're a 3 out of 10 or when we're a 10 out of 10. And so we start to introduce the concept of tools, or this toolbox full of tools that we can use to help ourselves calm down. The first one that we learn, and that your child learned about today, is the secret, the O2 regulator. So an O2 regulator is a secret breathing technique that's used to help us calm down. Deep breathing, or regulating our breathing, is one of the only proven strategies to instantly lower our nervous system stress. So when we're getting angry or worried and our heart rate is racing and we're getting all those physiological signs that we're getting anxious or moving into fight flight, one of the only ways that we can consciously and quickly bring that back down is by controlling our breathing. And so that's what we're trying to teach your young person how to do. And so during the session today, we've taught them some techniques to practice focusing on their breathing. And so we've asked them to rate their anger and rate their worries out of a 1 to 10, to say, how calm are you feeling now? How settled and calm and happy are you feeling now, between a 1 and a 10? And then we do the deep breathing activity for a minute. And then we ask that question again, how calm are you feeling now? And what they can see is that instant change in how calm they're feeling. Another way that you can introduce it at home is to count your breaths. So count your breathing normally. So if we were sitting here, we'd have the timer on our phone. We'd say go, and we'd just count how many breaths we take in and out in a minute. Say we take about 30. Then we'll say, all right, let's practice putting our hand on our chest, a hand on our belly, and we're going to do the same thing again, but breathing in through our nose, breathing out through our mouth, and we're going to breathe as slowly and as deeply as we can for a minute, and we set the timer. And so we practice it for a minute, then we do it again, and we count for a minute and see the difference between our normal breathing rate and when we're practicing our deep breathing. And what you'll find is that you can drop from, say, an 8 out of a 10 to, say, a 5 out of sort of 20 breaths in a minute, to doing, say, 5 breaths in a minute over the course of that minute. And then the more you practice it, the lower and lower and lower you get. So it can be really powerful in helping them learn that the more they practice it, the better they get at it, and the deeper that their breathing gets. So what we would love you to do in terms of homework for this week is, this is the information about how to do the O2 regulator if you want to know for home, is you want them to come up, and we've already talked about this in the session, so you don't have to worry about this part, but we've talked about a time when they might feel angry or anxious, and what and why, and just had some discussion around what that looks like so that we can relate it back to their daily life. Again, you might want to look at that so that you can have that discussion with them yourself. And then we want them to describe a situation when either they felt angry or worried, or you felt angry or worried. So we want them to be able to reflect on what happened at that time so that they can get a real life version of what that actually feels like, because it's something they've probably never really given much thought to previously. Then we start to work out how angry or anxious either they were or how angry or anxious you were. So if they're having trouble doing it for themselves, then it can be good to have that conversation and use you as the example until they start to get the hang of it, because being able to reflect on yourself like that can be really tricky. The next part of the mission for this week is to do the practice of the breathing. And so rating how calm you felt out of 1 to 10, doing the breathing activity and seeing if you're noticing a difference. So this is where the rewards sit. This is where we want your child, if they practice this once a day, every day, whether it's just before they go to sleep at night, whether it's while they're sitting down to have just before they have their dinner, it might be while they're waiting for their toast to pop up. We just want to make sure that they're practicing at least 1 time a day and that you're rewarding them for that time. So that's our mission for this week. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. Like I said, if you've got any questions, if you need to talk to the therapist at all, send us a quick email, give the office a call, make a time to slot into our calendar, and that's way you know that you won't get missed. I'll talk to you all soon. Have a great week.